Hey, good morning, you guys. Welcome back to the channel. This morning we're going to continue on with our process of learning the different elements of art. Remember in the last video I had brought up one of the elements of art, which was line. Today we're going to be working on shape and form. These two particular elements are extremely important whenever you're doing three-dimensional looking art, such as character design, or creating environments, or creating objects. It's mostly creating objects because you're dealing with standard shapes, to which, whenever I teach the kids that your world is built on shapes, and we go through the different shapes. So we're gonna sit down, we're gonna get back to basics, because basics are the foundation to which your artistic world is built on. So hopefully you guys will understand and enjoy the process. And we'll definitely continue on this week with the different elements, and hopefully in the next 3 to 4 weeks we'll move on to the principles of art, and we'll start actually showing you different rules and different principles that really guide you and use those elements to create artwork. So enjoy.
Okay, so shape. I think we all can agree that when we were in kindergarten, when we were in first grade, just to let you guys know, today I'll be using the Kohinoor color pencil. There's no wood in this pencil. It's got a nice flow to it. And I'm using the Strathmore toned paper. I believe this is 9x12. It's got a real nice tooth to it, and I'm starting on a toned surface, which we'll get into later in understanding why I do that. So shape. So we all learn our basic shapes growing up. We have your circle, of course. We have your square. We have your triangle. We have your rectangle. And then we can get into your more complex shapes. But we're not going to really do that. With our little pentagon here. But we're not going to get into too many of the difficult shapes. What I'm trying to iterate to you is, whenever you look at a piece of artwork, a lot of times the illustrator or artist has formulated the different objects in such a way that really break it down to basic shapes and composition. So if I were to do, say, a side dog, like a dog viewed from the side, I can break it down to its basic shapes. Now, to understand what a shape is, it is basically an element of art that is two-dimensional, okay? Two-dimensional. It is flat or limited to height and width. So whenever we think in our world, we always think in 3 dimensions, okay? We have height, we have width, and then whenever we start getting into 3 dimensions, we get into something called depth, and that's where a lot of people get in trouble. But it's not a big deal, because I'm going to take you through the process of really transitioning through that. So, shape. So, whenever I started doing artwork and I started doing character design, I always wanted to break things down into the most simple shapes I could. That way, it really helped me put things in such a way that I had the ability to do things step-by-step process. I'm a very hands-on kind of guy. I like things very simple, but also I like building things. So in that context, building things, we're going to get into a little bit of an oval here, so don't freak out on me. Building things, you always have to learn it is a one-step process. I always tell kids, I say, one of the things you have to understand whenever you draw is the fact that you have to take one step at a time. It's like stairs. You don't do them all at once. Stairs take one step at a time. So breaking things down into their basic shapes, such as this side view, remember, we're not thinking about depth. So the side view, I break it down into simple shapes. We have the basic the basic body shape comes here, and then I overlap this square because I want this back to have a nice straight line to it. And remember, we talked about lines last time. And then getting into how things are broken down, you can basically break things down into shapes. A really good example of this would be something like a flower. A lot of times I'll see things in the marketplace that are very simplified, but it still reads as being what the object is. So something like a flower is basically two circles. You have an inner circle, and then you have an outer circle, and then of course you have this stem that comes down that could be construed as a rectangle. So whenever I start really getting into this particular shape, I can start working inside of this shape and creating something that is recognizable as a flower. Now in graphic design, what happens basically is things are broken down into what's called a very rudimentary, readable shape. There's exercises whenever you create logos that break down things into their silhouette. H-O-U-E-T-T-E. This silhouette is something that is supposed to be read from a distance. It's supposed to be easily read. And shapes really cater into that particular facet of art. Something like a flower, once you get these two basic shapes, well, three shapes, 1, 2, 3, it still reads as a flower even whenever it's in its basic format. But whenever I start adding into it, it just reaffirms and reconfirms exactly what this shape is supposed to be. And whenever I start putting different shading in there, that gets into a little bit more of the next element of art that we're going to talk about, which is form. Okay? So there we go. So shapes, basically the building blocks of what you're creating. If I were to do a composition, say, of a poster, I would break it down. I would break this poster down to manipulate the viewer's eye using shapes and to lead dynamically how that poster is supposed to go. So if I wanted to, let's say it's a poster about a flower. I would put, depending on what somebody would, or myself describing on what the flower was supposed to be, I would break things down, and I'd start sketching in shapes. So I could say there could be a flower up here, there could be a flower here, a flower here, and then suddenly maybe I have a building over here. And again, always thinking about shapes and where things are placed on the page in terms of a flat surface, because you have to kind of have that play between the flat surface and the three-dimensional world that really is not only I'm trying to formulate things in such a way you guys understand. Having shapes on the page help dynamically direct your eye. The different shapes, depending on how you formulate them, whether it's a circle, which is typically a soft shape, then you have a triangle, which is an abrupt stop, and then it's got points, which a lot of people construe as being evil. It was funny, I put different shapes up on the board. I had the circle, I had the triangle, and then I had the square, and I said, okay, which shape is the friendliest? And the kindergartners and first graders all said the round shape because it doesn't have any edges. And then the evil shape was always the triangle, and the sort of neutral, stable shape was always the square. So even at that young age, we recognize what shapes are what. So in this particular looking poster to advertise some type of flowers, I've placed the emphasis on the subject that is the closest. And then again, we're breaking this down into the most rudimentary, non-three-dimensional look. So in this shape, there's a square, okay, on the page. Here's the circle, and it comes to another circle, and it comes to another circle, and then I have it broken up into another shape up here. Okay. So what you're basically seeing, the most contrast and the largest shape your eye is going to go to typically first, and then it kind of leads your eye through the composition. Then I could basically put, all my details on my flower in the foreground. Maybe there could be some verbiage right here describing the flower. And then we have other flowers here, and maybe I have a ton other little flowers that kind of go in here. And I'm breaking them again down to the simplest composition. And then maybe this flower is just sticking up and he's living up here. And then what's the story back here? Well, maybe that's like a greenhouse. And then I can have the clouds up here. So that basically lets you understand how things are broken down compositionally into shapes. So moving on to my favorite, one of my favorite subjects in this wonderful world of elements of art is form. So form is an element of art that is three-dimensional and encloses volume. So let's think about this for a second. Form. So it is a three-dimensional element of art and encloses volume. So it includes height, width. Okay, this is something like a graph. You guys have all seen a piece of graph paper. You know, you have your plotting lines. I mean, we're going back all the way to not geometry, but math class. And then you have this third element right here, this third plane. It includes depth. Okay, so you got to think in terms of three dimensions. You know, I've talked about before thinking in terms of three dimensions, that form with the volume inside. So one of the best examples, sorry about my throat, allergies are really kicking up here in Central Florida. It's been very, very bad. So three dimensions. So we start out with a basic shape of a sphere, of a circle. So then we have our height, we have our width of this particular shape, but to give it something called form, you have to have that depth, that third dimension. Now, how do you get that? Now, if it was a transparent sphere, transparent shape, and we gave it a light source, okay, let's say the light was coming from the upper right-hand side, the light hits the surface of this three-dimensional, because we're thinking height, we're thinking width, and now we're going to think depth. So the light source will be the brightest on this side, because again, we're thinking three-dimensionally. Now, everybody has done this particular exercise, I'm absolutely sure, because we did it in class. This three-dimensional square right here is a great example of how you as an artist can really practice form and volume and really start understanding how you can draw three-dimensionally. It's very interesting that once you get this principle across, then it becomes a battle between drawing on this 2D surface and thinking three-dimensionally. So if the light source hits my sphere, again, we're thinking height, width, and depth, sphere on this side, I'm going to have a shadow that forms the shape of the circle of the sphere. And then, of course, if it's on a flat surface, it's going to have a cast shadow of the shape of that sphere, right? Everybody's done or something similar to this. You know, there's so many different basic principle videos on YouTube, I'm sure, of this particular principle. What I'm trying to do is break it down into the simplest ways and help you guys understand exactly what form is. So form includes height, width, and depth. You know, example, of course, I'm drawing here could be a cube, which is right here, a sphere, which is right here, a pyramid, of course, if we draw a pyramid. Now, pyramid's a little bit different because you got to start thinking in terms of perspective, where I can draw basically this over here. It's a little bit different with a pyramid. Let's say the light is hitting this particular side over here, then you're going to be darker over here, and you're going to have a cast shadow that comes out like that. Actually, it's going to be like right there. Okay? And thinking in terms of that third dimension is something that's not as always easy as you want it to be, you know? It has to do with you realizing that, again, the page is not a flat surface. It is a three-dimensional surface or environment that you have to sculpt your drawing in. Forms may also be something called free-flowing. So let's say we have a free-flowing form, such as, maybe it's a raindrop. Okay? And the raindrop's falling through the air, and the light is hitting it on this side. So you're going to have a nice highlight right here. You're going to have a nice highlight right here. And you're going to have a shadow that comes around and on the bottom. Okay, and depending on what surface texture you're thinking or material, it's going to depend on how you're going to shade it. So that could be a possible free-flowing form that's falling through the air, or maybe a bean or something like that. So we're not going to get into the really free-flowing forms. However, these particular shapes are something that you can practice on all the time. A lot of times I'll do what are called light studies on circles, just to kind of get my brain going. So I'll draw 3 shapes, circles of course. I'll have my horizon line. Let's say the light's coming from here, which is what I just did here. So we'll have our highlight here. I'll have my cast shadow here or not the cast shadow. I'll have the shadow here on the sphere, and then I'll have my simple cast shadow here. Pretty simple. And then I'll move on to the next one. Let's say the light is hitting it right here. Okay. Then this will be the brightest part, and then I'll have the shadow that comes here, and it'll be in the back, because the way light reacts. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but I just wanted to let you guys see the process of what I go through sometimes. And let's say it's on the top, here's the brightest part, and then I'm following that line, that contour line from the outside of that particular sphere shape. And then of course, it's a larger shadow that goes here. Thinking three-dimensionally, understanding what shapes are in the context of your composition or your piece, or how you construct a complex image, always going back to the basics, always thinking about form and volume. Now volume, of course, is what is inside. We know what volume is. Like if you were to have a glass of water here, okay, if I were to fill that glass completely full, you would know if it was a clear liquid, you wouldn't be able to see what's inside. But let's say if I were to do a colored liquid, okay, so I've got my clear liquid right here, and I've got my glass, got the top of the glass, here's the table, okay, and you can actually see the liquid on the inside. And you can see how the glass itself, you can see the height, you can see the width, and you can see the depth right here, because you can see the back of the glass and the front of the glass. And you see what's inside, and that is volume. Okay? These are all things that will go hand in hand whenever you start drawing three-dimensionally and thinking three-dimensionally. My recommendation for you to really grasp this concept is to take a cup. Let's say you take a coffee cup. Again, I've used a simple shape here. Even if I were to go and I were to do a square and then, draw a smaller shape down here. And then I start thinking three-dimensionally. I start thinking automatically this is a three-dimensional object. It's got a side, it's got a top with an opening, there is a bottom, there is a back that I can't see, and I realize that since this top line right here contoured around the shape, around the object, there's going to be volume. So I start thinking, okay, coffee cup. So coffee cups are pretty easy to draw, right? Even if you have to have a coffee cup in front of you, that might be a better situation so you really grasp that three-dimensional reality. Okay, so you've got the coffee inside, and this would be a good example of what's called a free-flowing form. Coffee, water, liquid. Okay, And then I've got my coffee handle, which comes out again. I'm starting out with that basic square shape, but then within inside the context, or within inside the confines of that square, I start drawing that free form shape that I want my handle to be, and I start drawing the handle. And again, everything on here has a I'm thinking volume, I'm thinking, reconfirming these shapes. Now, the light, let's say the light source is right here. So the brightest side is going to be right here, and then you're going to have it here, and I'm going to have the cast shadow come here. Okay? And you're always thinking shape, form, line, all these things that I've already learned so far. And then I'm going to have a nice shadow right here, because again, you're thinking shape all the time, okay? And then I've got a nice secondary highlight, because maybe there's a wall right here and you get a reflective light. We'll get into that as well. So we've got a nice light source right here, and it's shining here, and it's going around your form. And the volume on the inside, maybe we've got a little bit of kind of hot. So that gives you a basic understanding of how shape, form, line are used to create basic shapes in our world. So I recommend you take a coffee cup, put it in front of you, put it in different positions. Maybe there's a view that goes like this. Maybe you're looking at it from the top view, comes around, and you get to see more of the interior. And here's the handle that comes around. And this involves a little bit more of a complex principle called perspective, and learning exactly how you can draw an object using perspective lines. Perspective we'll get into next. But for now, we're gonna rely upon these two particular elements of art. So the two that we've learned today are shape and form, which includes volume, height, width, depth. Shape is height, width. Okay, remember that. Shape is height, width, 2 dimensions. Form is height, width, depth, 3 dimensions. We think in 3 dimensions, so we're going to relate to this concept better. However, to get to this concept, it's always good to understand what your basic shapes are. One of the exercises I have the kids do is to draw basic shapes. And a lot of them, even though they say they know them, they don't. They'll sit there and they'll try to draw a square, and they'll have such difficulty. And whenever you start getting down to the principles and the basis of it, that understanding of living in a 3-dimensional world and thinking 3-dimensionally the whole time, whenever you ask them to put things in a 2-dimensional, okay? Because whenever you draw 2-dimensional, you are not really delving into this 3-dimensional world of this paper. You are drawing on the paper, right? But whenever you start getting into form, you're thinking 3-dimensionally. So I'm going to do a really short sketch of a dog, because I've been doing a lot of dogs lately. Incidentally, for those of you who are interested, I was contracted to do a children's book, a continuation of the story. This is the big announcement that I was going to make. However, the CEO and owner has actually done a video announcing me being their new illustrator. So I'm pretty sure I can indicate that I'm working on their book. It's called the company is called Buddy Pegs. The title is yet to be announced, but it's basically a story about dogs and the world that they live in. So I've been doing a lot of dog sketches, so I'm going to show you guys the basic principles about creating an image or a character, starting with basic shapes and then moving into these concepts that we've established today, which is form and volume. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start really quick I'm not going to put you guys on time lapse because where are we at? We're at 23 minutes. So I might have to do that because I don't want this video to be 35 minutes long. So I'm going to start out. I'm going to get the basic principles down of the shape, and then we're going to move into form. So, shape, dogs. So you've seen me do stuff like this before. And this is good because it gives you, again, a really basic rudimentary placement of where the dog's going to be on the page. Okay? And I'm drawing these shapes in to help you guys understand that basically, if you start thinking in terms of shapes and blocking in your shapes and knowing where stuff is, you won't really have an issue whenever it comes to completing the character design. So this is not one of the animals that I'm drawing for the book, just so you guys know. This is just a study. Okay, so whenever I get to this stage, I automatically go to form. My brain starts thinking three-dimensionally. Okay, it starts thinking, okay, I've got ears, I've got a muzzle that comes toward me, so I need to think, what are some of the anchor points that I need to establish first? Whenever you draw skulls, whenever you draw anatomy or characters, one of the main things you have to focus on is correct anatomy and relatable anatomy. So in terms of, the dog is facing me, but not quite. So he's got his perspective's changed a little bit, and it's turned just a little bit. Now, if you watch my hand, that would be a solid front-on view, okay? Now it's turned just slightly, and you see how now you can see this part of my hand just a little bit. Now, if it was like this, it would be a different viewpoint. But since I'm doing this, now I can see this part of my hand. Now, this concept goes all the way over into this particular drawing, because I'm going to see more of this side of his face, and you can already see that in my sphere. And since I've drawn this center line here, I'm thinking in terms of placement of where stuff's going to go. So I've got my eyes. I've got this eye line. If you've ever seen, some animators and some illustrators will draw this eye line, okay? And it'll give you a nice placement of where exactly the eyes are supposed to go. And I've got these eyebrows that come around here, and I've got this this eye box. I call it an eye box. It's not really an eye box. And you basically draw in your eye, you know, where your eyes are going to go. Because in the context of a skull, you have these large orbital areas where the eyeballs sit in. So if I was drawing this just simply, I would go in and just, you know, I'd go in and sculpt the drawing. But for this concept, I wanted you guys to understand how this is done. So you have this front muzzle that comes up here. And again, this is no different than doing something like this. It is no different at all. I am basically converting this simple shape of a three-dimensional box, and I'm converting it over into this character. And I just literally start, I mean, this shape will come over to the nose, and I've got a shape, you know, comes here. Okay? And again, look, see that nose is going to come out here. Then I got this split. And I'm drawing, you know, I'm thinking all the times three-dimensionally, and I've got these eyes that come up here, right? And then I could just literally start sculpting the drawing and just really, you know, having some fun. And because we all know that drawing's supposed to be fun, right? Supposed to be fun, Mr. Mike. I'm so upset. I get that a lot. I'm very frustrated, Mr. Mike. I'm very frustrated. What am I supposed to do? I'm like, you're supposed to, number one, have fun. That is the biggest thing. Have fun. If you're not having fun, then you're doing something not wrong. I don't want to say wrong, because, you know, we as human beings want to typically do things right on the first time. But you know, I say it's okay to get things, you know, to have things that are difficult. It's okay. So what have we done? So we've established where the nose is. We've established that three-dimensional box. Remember I talked about this right here? Okay, we've established where the eyes are. We've established, creating the basic circle form. So then I can basically start really adding the small details and where they are, right? So I've got this expression, comes up, okay, comes here, and then you got this other eyebrow that follows. Now look, you see you got this eyebrow that comes down, and this eyebrow that's going up. It kind of gives that expression. This eyebrow comes up. Okay. It's got this eyes that come around. Okay, and again, I'm thinking in terms of 3 dimensions, 3-dimensional surface. Comes out, comes in, and then we're going to come around here. Here's that jawline that comes around, and it's good if you obviously have drawn a dog before, which I have. Then you can know where stuff basically lives. Okay. Always thinking about form, always thinking about volume. There's stuff inside of this little head right here on this dog. Okay. I'm gonna run out of space, so we're just gonna have you taper off here. Okay. And again, the anatomy, even though it's got a square right here, we are thinking anatomy. We are thinking there is a muscle that comes down, okay, and then it goes out, and you have this large bit of muscles come around. And again, watch, I'm going to draw kind of a rounded, it's not going straight across. I'm thinking volume. So we're going to come down, and we're going to come around, and then you got this muscle here because his neck is turned. It's turned. Whenever you turn, that muscle on the bottom shoots up and gets straight, because these muscles, whenever you turn and he tilts his head this way, this is going to bulge out, because remember we talked about how whenever you fold skin in like this muscle has to go somewhere, so it bulges out, and that's what has happened right here. And then we come down like this, and here's his shoulder, right? And you got these eyebrows that are very prevalent, because you use, whenever you do characters in animation and design, they have to be something called animatable, right? Your character can't be so complex that whenever you go to do, thousands of drawings of it, that you have to sit there and do every single little detail. What's great about animatable characters is they're broken down to their basic shapes, and then you add the elements onto them. This is very true in my world, because I like things to be an easy read. Maybe give it a couple of whiskers. Here, and here. An easy read. So that basically lets you understand how you can create a what seems to be a complex character design, but at the end of the day, it's broken down into simple shapes, so you guys can understand, and then you can really start pushing and pulling these different shapes and forms. Maybe he's kind of like this, and this comes out, and it's rounded right here, and then he's got that one tooth that comes out, but he's got some whiskers on the bottom, and thinking in terms of a plane, that socket comes out here, and then it comes back down. So then this right here comes out, and you can establish where those eyes are a little bit better. Got the iris and the pupil, and then you just tweak it. You tweak it a little bit, and you start really thinking in terms of sculptability, and you start shadowing things in that really, really enforce that form, right? Make sense? Yeah? Okay. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this really short video, 30 minutes, on the elements of art. And today we went over shape and form, and we've barely touched on volume. Now, whenever I start doing stuff like this, and you guys start doing or seeing stuff like this, I'm reestablishing and putting in the details. I mean, it's just as simple as that. The basics are here, and I'm putting in those details. Okay. And again, If you guys are interested in the company that I'll be doing the children's book for, the company's name is Buddy Pegs. So look up BUDDYPEGS. They already have a book out that was illustrated by a previous illustrator. Fantastic book. It's got some really nice illustrations in it. It's called Bees for Bicycles. Look it up. I'll probably put the link in the description below. Look it up. Of course, they'll be doing a Kickstarter here soon, probably next month, that'll show some of the concept work that I've been working on for this book. And it's just a lot of fun. I mean, if you have children or if you're a young person and you really want to see the process of the creation of the children's book, please, go to the site, and then once they get the Kickstarter up, watch the process, watch the videos. I'll be doing videos that show the process of creating the dogs, creating the worlds, creating everything. And it's just going to be a really great opportunity for those of you who are interested in getting into children's books or even getting into illustration to see that process of how it goes from the start to the finish. And I'm using a new piece of software that I'm going to go into as well whenever I start posting the videos that I think you guys will really enjoy. It's just a great tool. So anyway, thank you guys. And today's lesson again was on shape and form. And get the coffee cup out. Get something. Get a shape that you can basically practice on. And start drawing it from your perspective. Drawing from life is extremely important because if you start drawing from imagination too early, your visual library will be skewed and messed up, and it'll take a lifetime to correct it. You want to be able to build up that library correctly and start understanding how the world works so you can put it in your illustration work. Gravity, we'll get into gravity. We'll get into how gravity really affects your drawing, especially if you're doing characters and stuff. So I'm very excited, and thank you guys, and we'll see you next time. Bye.